I decided that what we'll do in this session was based on these guidelines that we discussed. I've just got 3 simple cases. One is a real life situation which you all are familiar with, and the next 2 are hypothetical situations, totally come out of different people's brains, and I've just put it together over here. Okay. Now the first ethical dilemma or real recent most drama that has occurred, which you all are perhaps familiar with, is the one that is related to that antibody, T-Genero. Have you heard of it? Who has heard of it? Let me see, show of hands. Oh, only one person, nobody else has heard of it. Good. So I have some story to tell. I had made a couple of slides. This is very recent, maybe a year old. This is a company called T-Genero, and they had made this new antibody, monoclonal antibody, TGN-1412. Now this, I'm just going to tell you very briefly what it is, okay. It is, this T cell has a CD28 receptor and there is a co-stimulatory site. This monoclonal that has created TGN-1412 interacts with this co-stimulatory region of the receptor of the T cell without any agonist can activate it. That's what they thought. And in animals what they found was that it actually produced a lot of anti-inflammatory reactions. It stimulated the inhibitory T cell activity. So they developed, or experimental work, they developed it to mitigate autoimmune and immunodeficiency diseases. The immunodeficiency part being that with the assumption that it is actually stimulating the CD28 co-stimulatory signal. I don't know too much of this immunology, I haven't read it, and it's not pertinent to our discussion. Let us say that they have done a lot of animal work and they have developed a substance, it's a monoclonal called superagonistic, which is acting on this core stimulatory region of the CD28 receptor of the T cell. So it's doing something to animals so far. They went in the United Kingdom. There is this Medicines Health Regulatory Authority, MHRA, which gives clearance to do these studies, and then they have to take local ethical committee approval. Paraxel is a contract research organization, and it's a clinical pharmacology research unit at the Northwick Park Hospital, and they did this study. 8 healthy volunteers participated in this. It's phase 1. I must clarify, phase 1 means first in humans. All this while we had only animal work. This is a real story, okay? You can get this information on any place in the internet. What happened was 6 who were given active and 2 were given placebo as per their protocol, developed catastrophic multisystem failure. Those who had placebo, nothing happened to them. Multisystemic failure meaning, abhi that fellow was given injection, within 2 minutes the next fellow. That is how they did the protocol. They were not supposed to do it. To my mind, it's the first in humans. We'll come to the discussion. This is how it was actually done. They, 12 hours later, they were admitted to the Northwick Park Hospital, where they were managed. They didn't die, but none of them have died, fortunately. This is a story. Did you hear, did you understand the background? An article came in 2006 in the British Medical Journal which discussed some of the ethical issues, or rather raised questions, and I'm going to just put all those questions to you. I want you to answer them. How were the volunteers recruited and motivated? Was the first question. This is a phase 1 study. What are your thoughts? I have to tell you one more thing. After this story broke, huge hue and cry in Britain, I was told, and not by one person, but by 3 or 4 people working in the United Kingdom, that the number of volunteers wanting to participate in clinical trials went up instead of down, because of they realized the monetary compensation they were getting. In this case, they were given £4,000 per volunteer. Pounds, huh? Sterling, not rupees. How much money is too much? When does the money cloud the judgment? And the second point, how much accurate information did the volunteers receive? You know something? If in the evaluation later on, these people realized, and the company also said it's bankrupt by the way now, and they didn't have the money to pay for these people as well. The company said that, but all animal work has shown that it's been safe, so but animals are not humans, so volunteers didn't know that they might die, presumably. So answer these questions. Would you like to set some guidelines? What is your thoughts about phase 1 studies? Yeah.
Phase 1 trial comes after the animal trial when it is completed. In phase 1 trial, patient does not know what is going to happen. The drug is very new. Any consequences can happen, and the result which we get in the animal does not simulate the human being results always. So it is pertinent to know that what maximum risk can be in the case of first clinical trial. Accordingly, full information should be given to the participants, I mean volunteers. It is a must. That is my opinion.
It is, yeah. So then in this case, if genuine true information was given to the patients, volunteers, probably what they had, they didn't have information of what would happen to human beings. So that's why they couldn't give it. They didn't know. It was an unexpected reaction that occurred. So they must have listed out, based on which this decision was taken. How ethical is it for that ethics committee? When that ethics committee reviewed it, was there an immunologist on that committee which reviewed it, and did they take the genuinely full risks into consideration? Let us think this through. I'm not going to come to any conclusions. I'm trying to tell you that whatever decisions, and ultimately a lot of the responsibility lies on the ethics committee. Carrying on from that is the second question. Why do volunteers agree to participate? Allegedly knowing full well these risks. So then how much money is justified? Why did the ethics committee allow this? How would you make decisions about how much money is justified in compensating for that person's time?
The guideline says that the compensation is to be given to the participant for participation. It says also that the participant should be compensated for the time spent and other things. But when you take up a place like India, I am coming from a very small institute from a remote place of India. There are people who can't afford one day's bread or maybe a breakfast.
Correct.
So what will happen is if you are giving them just a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner, they are ready to participate, right? So that question, how much money is too much, is not at all relevant here. I mean, like
no,
we can't.
No, can we make a guideline for it? How much money is too much? I mean, that when will that money be inducement? Amount may be more. 4,000 pounds is irrelevant to our country. I mean, Chok Battis, 32,000 rupees. You wouldn't be able to give it here, but is 3,200 right? Is it right if you're doing it in Bombay? It's different, and if you're doing it in your place, it's different.
Right now, right.
So you mean to say you should have in multicentric study. I'll give you another example. There was a multicentric study that our center was supposed to participate in, where there were 2 centers in Mumbai and 1 center in Hyderabad. And all 3 of us had given alleged compensations as budgets. Ethics committees, my center was middle. The other Bombay center was much higher than us, 5 times higher I think. And the Hyderabad center was lower. But our ethics committee insisted that there should be a uniformity. They asked, how much are the other committees? That was when we asked. We didn't even know that they had different. We had put a value as what we thought would be reasonable. They asked, and when we found this out, then it was balanced out, and then everybody had a similar amount. Because it was, after all, what Hyderabad, Bombay are not different in any which way. So you should have a similar, and it shouldn't be exorbitant either. But ethics committees have. So what would be your guideline? That's what I want to know. How would you set an SOP on deciding so can we have somebody else's thoughts on this? You were saying something.
I'm talking about the risk, because when money is involved and you don't know really what you're going to do, a risk is involved there. If they tell you they're going to give you 200 pounds and you go there, they may give you the 200 pounds, the next day you die. That's the problem.
Which is what happened in this case. They didn't die, but it was pretty serious.
Then a lot of people will come over and say they want to do it.
How would you be able to set norms? What should guide you? What should be the factors in a phase 1 study? One factor, as he mentioned, would be perhaps risks. What is the risk that the volunteer is really being subjected to? The more the risks, perhaps at least the more the compensation is one way of looking at it. I'm putting this open for discussion. I don't have an SOP for this.
I also haven't. The drug companies don't know what the drug is going to do inside the body, and we really don't know whether we will live if we are taking a risk. Now, probably it will be the drug company's responsibility also to tell them, if at all this happens, this is how much we'll be giving.
No. 1 minute. Let me divide this very clearly. I'm not talking about compensation for research-related injury. That is different. Okay? If there is an injury, the company pays what the package is. This is compensation for participation. That is different. Now here you have two different scenes. You have a patient who is participating in the later development stage, and you have a normal subject. These guys were students, probably in search of a little pocket money, and you know, many of them were Asians. So they want to make side money to sort of, you know, have a party or something or whatever. But this is why they participate, and this is what I'm trying to tell you. This story has not diminished volunteers from coming. In fact, they're happy. Wow, 4,000 pounds. That's cool. I'm coming. I want to participate. But I'm sure nobody will make this mistake again. It's like people riding motorcycles. They feel they'll never have the accident.
Yeah, there are two issues in this.
Yes.
One is how are the volunteers recruited and motivated?
Yes.
Was there an informed consent at all?
Yes, informed consent process was there. Okay, let me tell you.
Did the informed consent have the information about this study?
Yes. Let me just tell you one thing. Don't ask some simple GCP questions like she said in the RRC study. Here also the report has exonerated everybody.
Okay.
The whole processes were correct. GCP was followed, GLP was followed, the toxicity study was blah, 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 blah. And nobody is at fault. This is just an accident which has happened.
This is something that
but the question is this, what should we tell our volunteers when you don't know the risk?
While a person is participating in a trial, when he is coming in the trial, what is it that we are going to give him? Not this amount that is there. So what is that we are going to give? The compensation for the travel time that this person has come, a certain kind of a wage compensation, because this person might have got.
So you mean to say if he was a common labourer, you'd have given him 50 pounds, and if he was a MS, M.Tech student, you'd have given him more
realistically. Something has to be, because it has to be a uniform.
Bottom line, all ethics committees should put into their SOPs what they consider as reasonable, or at least consider what guidelines they will look at when it comes to this issue.
Right.
And it has to be based on the local population. Like he said, in his case, even giving a free breakfast can be an inducement. So the scenes can be different, and if then we also have to then consider whether we want to do this study at all in this population, because of the risks involved. Their consent is not going to be an informed consent. It will be an induced consent.
In Canada, there are these tribal communities. When you go to them, you have to take cigarettes or cigars. That's a greeting, actually. Yeah, but this cannot be construed as inducement. So it depends on the cultural norms. You wanted to say something, last word.
Actually, what I wanted to say regarding how much money is too much. In my own opinion, I think that depends on a community. Because like in Uganda, we had a case where one researcher was going to pay participants $250. Now that kind of group of people already, where he was getting the participants, were people who are already poor. So $250 was so much that people it wouldn't be like voluntary, but because of what the money, like there's money gain, the person will just definitely participate. So I think it differs from community, and even depending on the standard of living in that community, the level of employment and unemployment. So that means that the ethics committee has to take into account social and cultural norms.
Yes, the only thing is that if you have a multicentric study, then I'm doing it, suppose the sponsor is doing it in Uganda at your place, and he's doing it in Northwick Park, London, and the third site is Australia or something like that. They do this. They do global clinical trials. Do you have different amounts of money for the different volunteers? Do you have different? This becomes an issue which I'm just putting it to you. You need to think it through as case to case basis. We have no answers. But here, these were some of the questions. Let's go on. There are many more questions that come up with this trial. The points over here are all ethical and are related really to recruitment of the volunteer. But if you look at the report of this study, there were a lot of technical questions which the pharmacologists in this group perhaps would be able to address. Why did you do this study in healthy volunteers instead of patients? If you knew this was a possibly toxic drug, didn't know anything about it. In normal volunteers, when you do all phase 1 studies are not done in normal volunteers. When we study anti-cancer drugs, we do them in patients. When we study antiretroviral drugs also, if they're extremely toxic, we'll go first in patients. Why? Because the patients have at least a small degree of benefit. These chaps, volunteers, the only benefit they had was what they thought was getting the money. There's no other benefit to that patient. He has to be doing it out of altruism. If you genuinely want to do it, because he's contributing to society and knowledge. See the responsibility that we have. This cytokine storm was known as a phenomenon in this case. This thing that happened here, it was reported in animals. In certain species, I think it was found, but they had thought it wouldn't translate to humans or something. There was a lack of understanding, even at the level of the ethics committee of this whole thing. There was one strong recommendation that did come out was that, and I think that's relevant, it has applied to us, is that in ethics committees, if there is a protocol about which you don't understand the science, do get it reviewed from experts related to that. Because you don't know the science, you don't know what are risks involved. You didn't know this because you were not an immunologist. So you didn't appreciate that this could be a problem. And the second was a technical issue is, I don't know what was written in the protocol, but this was something grossly wrong that within 2 minutes of each other, 6 volunteers received the active drug. First time in humans. You never do this. You have to give it to one chap. Wait and see how he is, and then give it to the next chap. You wouldn't have exposed all 5 guys at least. The first chap would have had serious illness. You would have put him in hospital and recovered him. Within 2 minutes they were given, and they were all kept in the hospital till 12 hours later. When they really became sick, they were taken from the CP unit to the intensive care unit. So these are the technical terms. This is applicable to us. I think I just mentioned this. What information did the ethical and regulatory bodies have? See, what happens is we rely a lot in ethics committees on the information that the PI gives us. How many times have you gone and looked for information related to that trial and that drug? Several immunologists have claimed that this trial was theoretically flawed, and there is published evidence about potential toxicity of this group of drugs. I'm not an immunologist. I'm not even raising all the technical questions over here. These were some of the questions that the British Medical Journal raised, Goodyear et al., and I found it very relevant. It's thought-provoking. When I'm sitting on an ethics committee, if a cardiac surgery project comes, I'm at loss. I don't understand. What are they going to do? What are the potential risks involved? I always insist that we send it to an expert. Let us get it reviewed by an expert who is in that field. I understand something about medicines and I can do some review about that. We also need to do our own literature review, which is independent. It's a lot of responsibility, but when it is early drug development, the responsibility is more, because nobody knows. And what information comes to us comes from the investigator, who sends it actually through the sponsor. Bias to hona hi hai. So you have to remember all these things when you're reviewing data. That is why this, and therefore the question that was raised was about the mouse model. Was it appropriate? Was that model the appropriate one? I don't know. You don't know. You're not an expert. But when you have a project and you want to protect this fellow, get an immunologist involved who will give you answers, so that you know that, okay, these are the risks, these are the benefits. So this illustrates the importance of external review. I think the last point over here is very important, that relative lack of severe toxicity in animal models should not be a guarantee of safety in man. You know what happened with thalidomide, that in thalidomide animal studies there were no congenital malformations because it doesn't happen in the rat model, I think. But you know what happened with human beings, that children were born with seal limbs. So there's difference, no? Animal differences. So this was another technical issue that was raised. If you go from this trial to a larger point, how much degree of transparency is there? Again, he raises the issue of mandatory registration, disclosure of clinical trials and their protocols, and should we push for an open culture in medical research? All this we are getting, all this information which I have told you now is only MHRA report is publicly available. The rest of it is all what is on the websites and Google searches and commentaries by people, or Wikipedia has a little bit about this. How authentic is that information, and who should have given me all this information? There are a couple of articles published, like this BMJ article. NEJM has given that is, no, not by the PI, it is by the intensive care specialist. The intensive care specialist has published an article about how he treated the patients. That's scientific. I mean, you know, he had the patients who were admitted under him and how he treated them and got them out of the cytokine storm, I think. But degree of transparency in drug development, how compulsory is it to give formal reports of these things? What was the follow-up of the patients? What happened now to the patients? We don't want to read about it on Google Alert. We want to read about it from the principal investigator, whoever it was. You can't just close down shop and run away. There has to be a transparency, continuity, because these drugs may be important drugs. Somebody else may come up with new monoclonal antibodies, and you don't want more adverse reactions. The MHRA report, most fabulous thing, as I told you, was that the report said everything was fine. Look at it from their point of view. See, they're saying that there's no problem, the manufacture, formulation, even the conduct of the clinical trials, but it was just an unpredicted biological effect. So, sorry. Then, of course, they formed a new committee, which I was supposed to, I mean, that's what most governments do. This is what came in an email or a Google alert. The lessons are that $4,000, or pounds, I'm not sure which it is not worth risking your life over. This is a Google, this is some lay person who has written that this is what you are doing if you are foolish enough to volunteer for medical testing. Whatever promises you receive notwithstanding, and that if you're foolish, you will be left to die by the company responsible without legal recourse should things go wrong. In other words, only an ignorant would sign up for medical testing. I predict a decline in voluntary test subjects and a rise in the use of prisoners and other disposable human subjects. No. It's a lay person writing. But why have I put this up here for you to understand is that this is the type of person we are sitting on ethics committees to protect. This is a potential volunteer. We need research also. We need human experimentation also. Remember, Helsinki said that. The patient is at the center, but at the same time, for progress, you need research. So there was nothing in practice wrong with the concept of doing the research. It was just somewhere along that we've lost track. And it was terribly a big price to pay for it. And this is also another Google alert. The 4 test victims learned recently that they have no detectable T cells, which makes it likely, read certain, they will suffer from numerous diseases and truncated lifespans. The victims have already suffered from severe injuries and so on and so forth. Of course, this is dramatization, but the point is I want a proper report of this also, which has not yet come. We need to be a scientifically discussing group. I want ethics committee's opinions. How would you handle it if you had this case, this protocol with you? You know everything in hindsight. It's very easy to say, "Arey, they did this wrong, they did that wrong." What are the lessons we are learning from this? When a protocol comes to you, what are the 3 or 4 lessons that you will have learned from this? I want to end this whole thing with 3 or 4 important messages. You got the story, you got the questions that BMJ had raised. You as ethics committee members, when you read this, what is a message that you will take home? Yes, ma'am.
The ethics committee should make sure that compensation amount does not serve as an inducement to pull participants. That is, for a lay person, as soon as you see, it would appear that 4,000 pounds is a large amount. I would like to draw the example of the IAVA vaccine trial that is going on in Chennai by TRC, for which YRG, I am from YRG, we were helping in recruiting participants. I had seen the documents as it is for all the visits that were needed. 1,000 rupees was fixed, and that too it was only after talking to the volunteers. I know that our staff members, most of the colleagues who were involved in recruiting the participants for that trial, they spoke to all the participants, potential participants. They came up with some from very economically backward classes, some who were very well off, and they were holding decent jobs. In fact, when three potential volunteers came to meet the person, I thought she was just having a chat with her friends. Then I asked her who were those persons, and then my colleague said that they are all potential volunteers for the IAVA trial. Of course, identity, everything will be kept confidential, but 1,000 rupees per visit was the amount. And after making sure that based on their economic status and based on their psychological understanding of the situation, it was ensured that money would not serve as an inducement for recruiting the participants.
That's a nice example you gave, but what I want to also emphasize, I do appreciate the point that you should, as an ethics committee, look at the incentive. I would like it if you consider having guidelines a priori. Before you discuss each individual protocol, what kind of things should go into helping you to make this decision? One message we got is about having guidelines for deciding monetary compensation. What else?
Regarding compensation itself, I would like to differentiate risk mitigation from compensation. I don't have an answer for how much is too much, but still risk, it is better to be covered under an insurance scheme.
No, that is understood. But if it is riskier, do you compensate more? I'm not talking about compensating for a research related injury. We decided that. That is a separate issue. We are not discussing it here. We are discussing about compensation for participation. So you will give that whether or not the person gets an adverse reaction or not. If the patient gets an adverse reaction, then wo sub treatment was supposed to be free. I don't know if they did it, but apparently Parexel went bankrupt.
I think when we get proposals, then maybe we can just instead of just relying on the investigator, we can, but with like you said, like we may get many cases in a short time. We have to review many proposals. So I don't know how feasible it is, but if we can work out some way in which we can directly go and
but what you can do is you don't do it for all proposals, but wherever the potential risk is high, if you put your patient's health as the primary central point, if you know it's a normal volunteer with a new drug, some monoclonal antibody, the risk is high. So I would suggest that goes. If it is an NSAID which is being evaluated in comparison for osteoarthritis, oh come on, whatever you know, what are the risks involved, and you don't need to send it to osteoarthritis specialist to be reviewed. But if you're doing something like this where you know that there are potential risks and you may not know all the risks also, and you may not be able to, so definitely involving experts involved in that or doing literature search by the ethics committee independently is something you want to think about. It's a difficult thing, but you should think about it. That is the second point.
Maybe we can form a separate team or
subcommittee. You can. It depends on the time available and how you handle it. The point is you must be aware of possible lacunae in knowledge before you make your this. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give an example of immunization in Nigeria. 6 months to 6 years child will be immunized. So the southern part of the country agreed. The northern part of the country said no. This is something that they wanted to do so that you will not have a child when you grow up. So what they did was to take that vaccine to United Kingdom to make sure that does it have anything to do with fertility. When they are sure that it has nothing got to do with that, they bring it back to Nigeria.
I see.
Then they start immunizing children.
It illustrates the same thing, that you need to have appropriate expertise in that ethics committee, and a ethics committee may not have it. So you have to opt. That's the second message that you have to go out for when you're reviewing. The first is about monetary and second is about this. And the last point which I want to raise is about the ethics of doing phase 1 studies. There is a need, but there are a number of ethical issues that come up first time in humans, and there is a lot of literature, and there is in fact a good published article about ethical aspects of a phase 1 ethical aspect research study he has done, where this person has looked at why patients volunteer, and this is a cancer study, because in cancer in phase 1 there are even more ethical issues, because you can only do it in cancer patients, ethical studies. Okay, let's go on to the next case. I hope I'm leaving you with some questions. I have to thank Nandini for this case study. Viraret, an antiretroviral drug manufactured in France, was tested in a South African country in an innovative regimen of short course treatment of AIDS in pregnant women to prevent mother-to-child transmission. The study, conducted under the auspices of the prestigious center whatever in France, has been, I can't pronounce it in French, so excuse me for skipping that part, has been originally designed as a rough comparison of efficacy, not as a pivotal standalone licensing study. The first study was done. Okay? As a WHO official put it, nobody expected Viraret to be so effective. This was meant to be a quick and dirty first look. However, the data from the trial was so compelling that the WHO, stating that further trials would be unethical, endorsed the use of Viraret as a single dose therapy for AIDS in pregnant women to prevent mother-to-child transmission. The government of an East African country, through its drug regulatory authority, based on this WHO comment, took steps to license Viraret for use. However, a re-monitoring of the original data by the French institution showed defects in compliance with good clinical practice. That would not be sufficient for the French regulatory authority to license the product. Citing a requirement that drugs proposed for licensing must be licensed in the country of manufacture, the East African government refused to license the product. WHO reaffirmed its recommendations for Viraret. Subsequently, the DRA of the East African government bowed to international pressure and licensed the drug. So, the questions: is the opinion of the French authority relevant to the decision of Africa? If so, Africa needed the drug because they have a high load maybe of need for drugs for prevention of vertical transmission. What was the role of the WHO, and what actions could have been taken by the partners to avoid such a situation? This is a policy, it's a higher level decision making thing, and I found this as a good question discussion, because it raises more questions than you can answer. So is a smaller developing country to be influenced by the decisions made by the authorities? Should they have listened just to the WHO study, which was a quick and dirty study anyway? What was the reason why France was refusing to accept it? Was because allegedly the GCP compliance was not there. So GCP compliance and the scientific validity of the drug, WHO reaffirms that it is effective. We don't have answers to this. Remember, all these questions, they'll come to you in the CD. You go back home and discuss it with your colleagues, you'll find that you'll be able to talk over lunch and dinner. The message to go home with is that when you're on a national body, many of you all may end up in serving there. The maturity that we need to look at different angles and the need of the country for whom the decision is being made have to all be put together. What decision they reached may be right or wrong, but it has an implication for a large number of people as well. If that drug is genuinely effective, you should want to have it there, not because somebody forgot to fill forms. If it's genuinely not effective or it's too risky, then it shouldn't have been introduced in the first place at all. So then before you make statements that this is the best thing in this century, I mean, any organization proposing something, all these things should have been done. Let's go to the last case. This is a very, very simple case, and I think many of you all will be experiencing this. That's why we've come down now really to a simple story. Dr. XYZ, a renowned skin specialist from a university hospital, sent an article on effects of a herbal acne lotion available in the market to a peer-reviewed journal to be published as an original paper. As evidence, he also enclosed photographs without revealing identity of patients taken before and after therapy. Editors of the journal asked for the ethics committee approval. XYZ now writes to the ethics committee giving details of the study. He further mentions that the lotion was available in the market for use anyway. As it was a local application, no harmful effects were expected. He had taken consent of patients on a piece of paper and had therefore not violated any ethical principles. He requests the ethics committee to give him approval for the study. Yes, sir.
What is the use of that research if it is already known that lotion is effective in the community?
No, herbal medicines are available in the market without proof of efficacy. In our country, at least, there's no burden of proving efficacy for herbal medicines.
Right.
No, our question is not about whether you will give permission. When he comes a priori, before doing the study, whether you will give post facto permissions. Many students come to ethics committees post facto. What do you do in such a scene? So you will not give post facto permission, but I would go one step further than that, sir, before you ring your bell, and that's the last word I'll have is, don't stop at that. Educate the teachers, the guides, and the students about the need and why this ethics committee approval is there, because most of the time they feel it's an obstacle. Taking ethics committee approval is considered an obstacle, one more step that they have to take for their PG dissertations. You have to, the ethics committee also has that responsibility of educating people that what the role is of the ethics committee. So thank you all for your attention.